Hey there, guys, gals, and non-binary pals, and welcome into SMITE 2 Long Didn't Watch. This is just going to be our weekly, I guess, kind of recap show, kind of look-ahead show as we go through the Founder Series. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, the Founder Series started just this last week. It is this long 12-week competition for NA and EU, and slightly shorter for some other regions that aren't going to be going to Vegas, but some that are going to be going to Las Vegas to be able to play at the HyperX Arena. Again, it's a $300,000 prize pool at the very end. There's technically 6 stages. There's a certain point where we stopped calling them stages, so I numbered them, but I don't think we've ever really called them that. But it is a very, very, very fun event. It's cool to be able to watch SMITE 2 esports. I'm sure for y'all, but definitely for me, finally casting esports again. Like, it feels so good to be back. And I'm going to use this time now to remind you, tomorrow at 9 a.m., which is the last time I believe we're going to be live that early, 9 a.m. Eastern, EU, or EMEA, I should say, week 2 of the open bracket is kicking off. The top 16 teams from EMEA and from NA will be moving forward to the Swiss stage. Everybody else will be playing in an open bracket during stage 2, which we can talk about that a little bit later, probably next week, since that's when we're actually going to be getting into all that. But then 11 a.m. on Sunday, we'll be going live with North America. So if you want to compete, you should go to rallycry.gg/smite2 and sign your team up now, and then make sure to be there on Sunday, and don't give our admins a hard time if possible. And then, of course, if you just want to watch, then be where you're probably watching this, unless you're watching this on the YouTube channel, in which case go to twitch.tv/SmiteGame, or just follow us on socials at SMITEPro, and you'll find everything. That felt more like an outro, though. Gore, Trelly, J-Mac. Oh, hello. We are still physically close to each other. Did not realize my hand would go over there. But last week we had the first week of open bracket.
Yep.
And it was so refreshing to be back.
I mean, it was. And first thing I want to note is the fact that you said top 16 teams move on. That is not from your placement in 1 week. That isn't. It's all your points, right? So points. Even if you had a rough week 1, you can come back strong this week. So definitely sign up, even if you signed up last week and it wasn't fantastic. You learned some stuff, put it to good use here. But man, we got a very good start, I believe, as to what kind of metas are starting to form. There's a lot of strats that I took note of that the top echelon of teams were doing, and maybe these bottom tier ones that had like a good strong roster but not the strongest team presence weren't really picking up on. So I hope we see that exemplified this week.
And you specifically, and first off, before we get too far into it, I am gonna say 250 diamonds per team, just for competing in a single game. So even if you don't think that you can win, there's still a good reason to show up and play. And to, I guess, note on that, because J-Mac, I know you, and we'll talk about it a little later, focused a little bit more on what happened in NA and all that, which NA was a blast, and EMEA was also a blast. And Trelly, that's where you found your home this week. No. I flipped it. I remembered, hey, all right, pause. I remembered which order we needed to do them in. I didn't remember who did which one.
That's okay.
Which is okay, because I said the right thing but the wrong thing, and that's all that matters. Which means, Chelly, shut up and get out of here. J-Mac, you did the one that I just said.
Yeah, so EMEA is interesting. One of the things that we talked a lot about with, the old SMITE 1 era of EMEA is the much more methodical style of play where you kind of sit back, they kind of passively farm up until you hit that level 20. That style of play didn't really echo here in the EMEA for SMITE 2. They still played very similar styles to what we saw in North America. In fact, I would say in EMEA, we actually saw a lot more rotations from solo lane. We saw a lot of people doing early teleport strats over on that side. And this bracket was actually a very fun one to watch because we had a lot of big matchups happen somewhat earlier in some of the brackets, with Team Risk and Giorgio, the smoke break kind of hitting into that top 4. That was kind of expected. And luckily for them, I guess in this case, they got to play a little bit later down the road in the bracket. But there are a couple of teams that I did kind of want to shout out here that to really, really watch out for. I think that Yoda Gang was one that got knocked out a bit maybe earlier than expected by Smoke Break, which, with Smoke Break taking second place, maybe not as tragic for them, but sometimes that's the way that the random seeding works out. So I think for Yoda Gang, that is one that I would probably be looking out towards for the next week of play, just to see what those guys can do. The players on that one: Merca, Renegade, Raze, Ollie, and Seagull, at least for notable names that you've probably seen around. Renegon has been I don't know what I said, Renegade. I think that's just the natural. It's Renegon. My apologies there. And then Seagull out from the solo lane. But I think between that team, Seagull and Raze were really the ones that were catching my interest between the jungle and the solo lane. They got a lot of the ball rolling. The problem that I noticed with their team, and part of why they fell to Smoke Break a little bit earlier in the bracket, was just because while they were getting a lot of early leads, and that's kind of one of the big points that we saw in this first week of play, was those first 10 to 15 minutes are so crucial for these teams, because if you can get 5, 6, 7,000 gold up ahead by that 10, 15 minute mark, you can essentially continue to just kind of run away with games at that point. And I think that while Yoda Gang was able to pull some of those leads, weren't able to close out against some more veteran rosters of Smoke Break. But Yoda Gang's just one of the teams to watch. We actually have a few teams out here recommended that you guys can watch as well. Obviously, two of the big ones that had one out, or at least the winning team in Team Risk there: Variety, Lasbra, Theeks, Genetics, and Street. And Giovanni Giorgio, who I believe was third seed coming out from this after the first week of play. Nika, Adapting, Dardes, Kazakhs, and Vaporish Coast. Yeah. All makes sense. You see those names, you go, okay, those guys are probably top 4. If they're not making top 4, they probably got knocked out by one of the other ones in that top. I think teams that may be surprised that they didn't make it as far are these two teams on the right side, Mockingbird and Scorps. You look at those names; these are players that have been around the SMITE and SMITE 2 scene for such a long time. Ducky, Rapio, Hawk, Raffer, and Spuddy on the side of Mockingbird just couldn't quite get everything together. Bracket didn't quite really favor them out. Similar situation for Scorps, for Kana and his roster. I think that these are teams that have that potential to jump up there to the top seeds. I think it was just a case of, when you get to first week of an open bracket, there's no seeding. You're not sitting there going, okay, you guys were really good, 2-3 years ago when SMITE 1 was the big thing. But in SMITE 2, there is no kind of established plot relevance with that sort of situation. We know that you were a good player. Now it's time to come out here. But it is just a random seed going in. So unfortunately, hitting up in the bracket is kind of where sometimes these fall, where you get placed against one of these top 4 teams. You got to really put the proof out there.
That was one of the teams, Scorps in particular, that I thought would have been, very highly contested, but end up going down very early on. The Titans Reloaded. So, it's one of those things where just because you may have been a powerhouse squad in SMITE 1 doesn't mean you're going to click immediately. We still have to get into that team environment. And this is what I wanted to bring up, was about just that meta that's starting to form, where, for example, I didn't picture Fenrir to be as highly contested as he was. And then once I saw that, I was like, oh, Fenrir is the new guy. And then pretty much immediately that was Xnade, and they're like, it's actually Odin. Now that you're used to Fenrir, we're switching up entirely. And so these things, they happen so quickly because this game is just now starting to form. There's patches coming constantly. So if you're not watching competitive SMITE all the time, you're getting your fill on your Saturdays and your Sundays, you might not be able to adapt in time. And I think that's a big kicker about who's going to be able to be at the top form of these tournaments, is who locks into what the meta is going to look like as fast as possible.
Well, and that was the thing that was really interesting, because going into our 24/7 launch Conquest tournament, that was hey guys, you've been playing for 4 days. What can you do with it? Have fun.
Yep. Yeah.
And then last week it was all right, you've had a week and a half, 2 weeks. Where are you at? Now they're going to have another update to play on this next weekend, which is maybe getting too far into the future. But I like that kind of balance, because you said, Odin caught me completely by surprise, where I was just oh yeah, so this, and this. These are the 4 gods that either are banned or first picked. Mm-hmm. And I was wrong, I think, almost every single time that I called it at the beginning of a picks and bans. And instead, as I learned as the week went on, it was Odin almost every single time, and he did a lot of damage. That was true across both regions.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah, and I think Odin has shown some flexibility. We've seen a little bit of support Odin over time. We've also seen some of the solo lane Odin. And I think that's where kind of the success comes from some of these gods, is the ability to be able to flex between the multiple roles. And that's kind of the benefit of SMITE 2 now, is that it has opened up for more gods to be able to flex like that. If you look back in SMITE 1 era, you see a Ymir that is that is support 99.9% of games, and you might get the random, jungle game out there. Now we see gods like Bacchus and Ymir and even Ares to an extent flexing more often towards other roles as well. Seeing those solo lanes, maybe some of them coming up into the jungle. And I kind of talked a little bit about Yodi Gang earlier, and I kind of want to bring attention to the matchup that they actually had that ended up getting them knocked out of the bracket was whenever they were going up against Benko in the solo lane. I mean, this is a team that I think has what it takes to continue moving forward for Yodi Gang, but unfortunately for them, when it comes to the late game, they're a little bit disjointed, and I think moving into week number 2, I would really love to see what Yodi Gang can do whenever they're able to really kind of form themselves up more than anything.
Mm-hmm. That's the thing that really caught me out was there were so many teams, and I think this was, again, true across both regions, but like the random seeding of week 1, which I think we'll get this again in Swiss because that's also going to be randomly seeded for the very, very initial kickoff. But like there were a lot of powerhouse matchups like every single round because that's just the way the bracket decided to fall out. And so the fact that like, what was it? I think Giovanni played up against Team Risk, and that was like the semifinal. And I'm like, oh my God, that is. Yeah, I was up there in the top semifinals. Like, that feels like it could be a super high caliber. You had mentioned Scorps and like Titan Reloaded. You had mentioned Yodi Gang and like that being in the round of 16 down there. And it's just like there were so many good matchups. And I'm really curious to see what this next week is going to do. Seeding wise and like team wise, and like you said, maybe like god wise, patch wise, all this stuff that's going to change for EMEA.
Yeah, I think SMITEPro is definitely a team that I'm going to be keeping extra eyes on as they go forward. Obviously, they made it to the grand finals, took that second seed, but I think some of it is kind of coming off of what Benko is able to do in that solo line. For those who are unfamiliar, he used to be formerly known as Deathwalker. He is just kind of
the artist formerly.
He's always been like an adaptive player over in the solo. Benko is one who has been able to take gods that have either been out of meta for such a long time or gods that people have kind of forgotten about, and just brought them back into the limelight. When you look back in the SMITE 1 era, nobody was playing Bologna, no one was playing Osiris. And all of a sudden, here he is, just bringing those gods out, absolutely owning with it and redefining metas on the moment. Do I think he's doing that in SMITE 2? Maybe not quite yet, but he is making some big plays in the solo lane. So I think Benko and his squad of SMITEPro is one that I would want to keep my eyes on. Their performance against Yodi Gang showed just what happens when you have some of that veteran tenureship to your name, being able to sit there and go, okay, sure, we lost a little bit of the early game. No big deal. We're going to have the superior team fight once the game goes a little bit later. And I think that watching some of the, I'm going to call them kind of Hail Mary style plays, is one that Yodi Gang tried pulling against Benko, where they're like, okay, we're going to sit inside the grass. We're going to wait here for like 4 or 5 minutes. It feels like that long times. In reality, it's like 15 seconds they're sitting there. And they're like, okay, we're going to get the soul in when he comes back here because he wants this buff. And they're able to kill Benko, but then it literally just costs them like everything after that. I mean, when you make a play like that, you have to be so confident in your play, and then if you do get the success, and I'd actually like to show the kind of the clip off for that one, which we were able to pull. I think that this moment in particular is kind of where that desperation kicked in. You're a little bit behind. You want to try and find that big play, and you get that kill, but now it's this really scattered and just disjointed team fight from Yodi Gang where you have one guy going in and it says, oop, I took a little too much damage. Your next guy goes in, oops, I took a little too much damage. And it's just this constant trying to reevaluate how they want to handle their team fight. Okay, well, do we want our support to stick in there? No, our support's too low. Do we want our jungler again? No, our jungler's gone. We need to get rid of them, get out of here. And I think this is where Yodi Gang kind of fell apart in their match against SMITEPro. Sure, by this point, they're already 10,000+ gold down, and they make a desperation play. And sometimes those Hail Mary style plays can net you, but in this instance, they killed Benko, which, sure, killing the soul laner is great, but Benko wasn't even ahead. He was 0-5 on the chalk at that, or I guess 0-4, then 0-5 immediately after. Benko wasn't the problem on that team. Killing a chalk is not what you want, but they invest way too many resources to do so, and because of that, they end up getting their fall. So I would like to see some of the adaptations from Yodi Gang moving forward. And for SMITEPro, their matchup in that finals is actually a pretty intense one. Even though this one was only a 2-0, I think that our grand finals matchups may have been closer than we have seen in our previous tournaments. If you look back to Alpha Weekend 2, Alpha Weekend 4, even the closed Alpha tournament, this is actually a really intense grand finals. And I think that as these weeks continue forward, as we start moving towards the Swiss stage, as we still have this next week of open bracket to play, there's a lot of potential for these grand finals to go even further in the distance and whatnot. So I'm very excited to see how some of these teams continue to adapt moving forward.
Yeah, I think that the thing that I'm looking forward to, and it's also because we still have the region split up, and we'll get into it, but like soon we're going to be adding LATAM and Brazil and APAC into the mix of like, hey, here's, what happened in other places. And seeing, if EMEA adopts the strategy and style that we've kind of known them for, and then eventually if like NA and all these other guys like get into that, or if it's kind of what we've been seeing where it's the Wild West out there, and man, if you didn't bring a gun, you're getting shot down.
And I kind of do want to highlight the winning team here, Team Risk, the one who wins out in week number 1 of the EMEA. They had a lot of really big moments throughout their entire set and really throughout kind of their whole bracket that really showed some of the veteranship that this team has and really the level of communication as well. When you have a team with Genetics, that there's going to be a lot of comms going through, and there sometimes might be some second guessing, okay, do we need to go in? Then somebody to kind of really bring you back in. And Genetics is one that I kept my eye on a lot because this guy is a theory crafter. I tune into a stream and I never know what in the world he's going to be playing in a ranked game. I tuned in the other day and he was full damage, needs support with a single defense item at the very beginning of it. And he was just owning people. Now, granted, it's a ranked game. It's much different than a competitive setting. We are going to probably not see a Neath support pop up anytime soon. Morgan's support was something that was being thrown around in the ranked games. Who knows what we're going to see? But Genetics is a player who really plays around the strengths of a character and also plays around the strengths of the map. Sundering Arc was a really huge item. I think that every single support just about was picking it up. And I'll be honest, if in this first week of play you weren't picking up Sunder, and I even still say after some of the nerfs, if you're not picking up at least one, you're probably kind of trolling a little bit because this item is really good, especially around objective play. And this is really where Genetics and some of the best supports out there over the course of history will shine, is their play around objectives. And there was one turning moment for Team Risk where it looked like they were on the brink of defeat. They're on the back foot. They've got to defend up against the Fire Giant. And Genetics is able to break through, walk up, and just steal a Fire Giant from under the nose of SMITEPro. And I think that the moments like these are where that level of communication comes in. Because at this point, SMITEPro, they're ahead. They have a great Odin Cage that's able to keep Genetics out, but the DPS is just not there on the Fire Giant, and that gives Genetics enough time to be able to walk in and steal that objective, to take that Fire Giant away, and then the entire team is able to rally in and recuperate in order to get there and be able to secure those kills afterwards. Also, I just think that Lazaro was sick on the Susano, and if we could just roll this clip eventually into the next one, which is another just Lazaro play, this just comes down to standard style of Lazarus, which we were seeing these early rotations. I mentioned that we were seeing solo laners rotate out of the jungle or out of the solo lane pretty often, get the teleport, go over to the other lane. But Lazarus was also doing the same thing on the Susano, able to rotate early into lanes, where this fight looked like it was almost entirely cooked. Genetics not able to quite close out a kill on Benko. Benko's able to walk away, and then it's Genetics and Street getting low, and you think that, okay, it's over. Team fight's done.
I can see him on
We're not going to do anything else. You take a look at that little mini-map. Lazarus got that awareness to recognize, okay, they're still here. Genetics communicating, they're still here. And he's able to rotate over and get these big picks, get these big kills, and kind of start their team off on a good foot. And I think that this is where this team has that level of communication with each other as well. These players may not have all played competitive together at one time. You look at that core three that was there in the middle, which was Theeks, aka formerly Big Man Tings, Variety, and Genetics. These are guys who were literally just playing competitive with each other not very long ago in SMITE 1's era. And by the way, won a world championship. And I think that by having a core three of your frontliners and at least one of your damage dealers, having that experience together really does net you a benefit. And it allows for, whenever Theeks has that level of safety and confidence, knowing that, okay, no matter what I do, my frontliners have got my back, he can make insane plays. And I think that one god that we're probably going to continue to see at the competitive level is Hecate, whichever way we want to go with it. I'll probably just continue saying Hecate at this point.
I like the idea of all of us just eventually saying both, just so like we cover both options.
It's just going to
Hecate, whatever you want to say.
It's going to be like a data moment where you just kind of say whichever one flows off the tongue better at that point. But Theeks on the Hecate and this god in general was just crazy throughout the weekend. We were seeing top priority picks towards this god, and it's because they're able to make insane plays. I mean, Theeks on the Hecate has a really good play during that set, which is able to help keep his team going and really continue to elevate what his team is able to do. And I think that because Theeks is so confident that his backliners have his back, or his frontliners have his backliners can do their own thing, he's able to make these crazy plays, pulling people out of what would have been safety. That's an enemy Odin cage placed there so the enemy team can retreat. And Theeks just yoinks him back. He just says, okay, well, I've got a giant portal. Why don't I bring you right back to the rest of my team? This is for my money, this is the team to beat right now, not just obviously because they're the #1 seed, but I think that they have the best level of synergy compared to anyone else in the bracket right now. So if you want to find a key to success, I think it has to be done by defeating this team here with Team Risk, the #1 coming out of week #1, and definitely the biggest one to keep your eyes on for week #2.
And that was something I had talked about. I think I had mentioned it most in NA because we had, Cowabunga that just exists, but like I remember talking about it, and it was while we were behind the scenes. Maybe I said something on broadcast. I can't even remember. But like there was this huge discussion about like, I expect in Swiss week 2 is when we're going to start seeing a lot of these like top teams that are made of people who were really good at Smite in the past suddenly maybe have some teams that we've never heard of matching them, right? Because it was like, yeah, you're going to have a lot more competitive experience at that point. I was really surprised because we started getting that super early in this last week. And so it's fun to watch these teams because like these are guys that have been playing Smite for a long time and do incredibly well, and they have that history. But then seeing some people like give them trouble is like, it's good for me. It makes me happy.
And one of the things we didn't really see a whole lot towards the end of the kind of the Smite 1 era is we saw a lot of the same names kind of playing at that top level. You kind of stuck with your boys as much as you could. And seeing this tournament where it's just like, okay, here's 3 or 4 really good players. They were really top players in Smite 1, and then one person who was kind of up there, but not quite at the very top just yet, or players who were right on the cusp of it. And I think the addition of Streak up to this roster, or Streaka as he goes by, at least for the time being, was a really good addition to this team and has already found some really good synergy along with their side laner. I think the variance that we also saw in the solo lane was probably a lot more than I expected. When we came into this week, I was looking at solo lane meta and going, okay, what in the world are we going to be seeing solo? Odin was kind of up there, at least in thought, but I thought as well with how strong Bacchus had been, with what we've been seeing in Ymir in casual and ranked games as well. Maybe we'd see some of the Ymir solo. Hades kind of popped back up, and Hades like dominated for a while on his like release. It was just like, oh my God, Hades is here, guys. We got to pay attention because this god is crazy. Turns out the god is still kind of good, and when Variety and Streak are just allowed to essentially 2v1 run at the enemy team, they're able to make crazy plays like this. You see Theeks in the back line on the Hecate just constantly able to throw out CC and pump out damage. But Variety this entire time is just constantly W-keying the enemy team, and he has that Amanita Charm, that Mushroom along with him, that allows him to keep doing that. Now, coming into this patch, the Mushroom has gotten a nerf, so we probably won't see as many of them as we had in some of the matches before. Maybe one for your support at the very most. But I think that just this team as a whole, Team Risk, is the one that you have to figure out, where do we find the weakest member of the team? Which is a hard thing to do when you look at that roster. It's hard to look at Team Risk and go, man, who's the weakest on this team? Maybe it's Streak because he didn't quite have the level of professional play in the previous era of Smite. Maybe it's, I don't know, Lasbro because he hasn't really played with these players in a while. He was playing with a lot of the more of the North American style of players, when he was in the era, with PBM and whatnot. So where do you find that weak link for this team on Team Risk? I think it's trying to slow them down early. And then when you get to the late game, you just have to be a little bit more calm. And more than anything, you have to play around where Genetics is on the map, because Genetics is just playing exactly what he did at the end of his previous career era. It's just, I'm going to play Ymir because Ymir is kind of good. And as long as Sundering Arc is good as well, I think that this is what's going to separate the great supports from the best supports. And Genetics has already been showing that he has a great handle on this. When you listen to team comms with these kinds of teams, they're playing around that relic. Do you have your Sunder? Yes. Do they have their Sunder? I don't know at this point. Okay, we need to be careful about this. Can we kill their support or their solo or their jungle who has this relic? That's the kind of communication you have to be looking for with these teams and making sure that you're kind of keeping account on that. So I think going into week #2, this is the team you want to watch out for. But really any of these teams that landed in the top 4, which I think the most surprising one was Teuthonic, a team that has some talent and some names on their roster, but isn't what you would necessarily expect. I mean, when you looked at some of the previous ones, like Mockingbird on there or Scorps, and you see, wow, these are guys that have literally just been playing like forever. Teuthonic has some of those names, but it's not quite all the way across the board. You have names like Kalas and Ice Ice. They've been around the scene for a long time. But then you have, Icy, who's still a great player, but isn't quite, at that wasn't at that pro level play. Emmanuel and Nil as well. But being able to land in 4th with all of this talent surrounding them, I think just goes to show that this is a team that you do need to keep some attention towards as well. So I think moving into week #2, I'm going to be keeping eyes on how Teuthonic places. Maybe it was they got a little bit of extra help on the bracket for their run. Maybe they just happened to get a couple of big lucky breaks against a team. It's not one that we really got to watch throughout the broadcast for them. So at least moving into week number 2, Team Risk, the team to beat. Teutonic, probably the team to watch more than anything else.
And that's the thing I think worth mentioning again for these open bracket, not just, I guess, this stage, but also stage 2B and any other open bracket, at least that we have determined, which is the fact that the points matter a ton, not just for qualification to the next thing, but just week to week, right? I mean, that is going to make a pretty big difference. But EMEA, it was a good time.
Yeah, EMEA was fun, and I think that they went against the kind of expectations and a grain of what has been established in that region in the prior installment of the game, where in Smite 1, you're seeing the EMEA, you're like, okay, we're going to be here for like 35 minutes.
Cool, methodical.
That's just not really the pacing of the game right now. I mean, Ancient Furies are being picked up by 25 minutes in the game, which is an objective that you would kind of see as your siege tool towards the later stages of anything. But right now, the late game is kind of 25 to 30 minutes as opposed to in Smite 1, where that was somewhat hitting the average time. So I think that this level of pacing was a bit surprising, but I think has kind of just become now the expectation really for both of the regions.
And that's, you know what? I'm going to, because you said both of the regions, I'm going to remind people, hey, Trelly, you're still here.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, what's up, man?
What's up, man?
If we want to talk about, like, teams that are really aggressive, I feel like, and this has been, again, maybe general over a decade now of competitive Smite, it usually ends to air towards North Americans, which I feel like is usually kind of makes sense given what people say about Americans and their demeanor. But I do think it's really interesting because I feel like that, like J-Mac has said, like across both regions, like right now, I mean, you could be down 2,000 to 3,000 gold at 8 minutes if you've just been playing wrong.
Right, and that's something that I wanted to highlight with my overview of NA, of course, is when you start off the week, we were checking out the teams to watch, right? And that's going to be, your immediate go-to, like, okay, I want to pay attention to these guys. I want to see how they play. But just because a team has names you recognize does not mean that they found success early on at all, right? I would say for the majority of these games, I mean, I was watching players that I'd never heard of get up 4-0, sometimes like 6-1, 6-2, up against teams like this, like Cowabunga, like Sunday Slayers, like Team But with 5Ms. Was it because they were misplaying? Maybe, but that's not really what I wanted to zone in on. I wanted to zone on the fact that just because those squads fell behind a bit, you got to listen to their comms, you have to listen to their demeanor, and you have to pay attention to Gold Fury. NA was playing on the left side of the map. They were playing towards the Gold Fury. They were looking towards early cringe ganks and duo. They were almost, I'm not going to say ignoring solo lane because the teleporters do matter, but all of their pressure was around Gold Fury. If you were a top-end team, you were looking to pull gold at 4 minutes. Even down 0-4, you were pulling Gold Fury at around that time. And you were confirming it with your Sunder, you were going back to base, and you were dying a couple more times. But the gold lead was always what I wanted to zone in on because, I was watching a lot of Team But with 5Ms because, in my opinion, they were the team that was going to be able to, dethrone Cowabunga if they ever got matched up. That was at least the thought process leading into this week because Cowabunga looked so lethal. But they were farming so incredibly well, and I had to go back because, of course, we did watch a couple of Team But with 5M's games, but I had to go back and see what specifically they were doing differently because it was something about their farm that was catching my eye. And when we go into the clips, I'll explain more. But we can go ahead and look at the bracket, of course, to show exactly how NA ended up going out. And there was still a lot of talent here. But you may have noticed, of those teams, Food Drive for Globe, man. They were another team that still had a lot of talent on them, but were able to make it all the way to the finals. I think a very good side of the bracket for them to do so. It did seem like the bottom half was just a bit more stacked, in my opinion, but you got your points, right? That's what's important. You need to get your points to be able to confirm top 16, so you have to perform well in both weeks, and I think all of the teams here will be able to do so, no problem. But looking at just how these squads played, I'm glad J-Mac highlighted the Hecate in particular because that was a pickup that, man, I want to say a month ago, I was talking about how it could have been a higher echelon pick, one of the top, not necessarily top pick, top ban, but if you had a Hecate player on your team, if you had a mid laner that could make use of this character, then yeah, you could be looking to first pick. And sure, that happens sometimes, but I'm telling you, the ability that Open the Gates provides is one of those things that, good Janus players can only dream of, right? Because you don't need to hit the snipe. That's not really what's important. It's not the big AoE damage. It's the fact that you yourself can go in, you can bring your team out, you can get people away from you. It works over walls. There's just so much versatility in that kit. So I did want to bring up the Shinto clip that I grabbed because I think it plays quite well what I'm talking about, where this fight doesn't really look great, right? You're looking at a moment where your squad goes in, a lot of damage comes through, and I believe in the cast, I'm calling like, oh, this fight looks rough. And then you just watch Shinto, and by the way, Leon lives way too long here, starts to, build up for the team, and then you see him cook. And I think Gemma Focus is another reason that Hecate can be so strong, because it's an item on paper, 45 intelligence, not that fantastic. Once you spam 3 different abilities, you get up to 90. And you can just see, I called it a 2v5 because it really did feel like it. It was just Shinto juking around while Haddix put in work. And Shinto doesn't have to put himself in harm's way. Look, over the wall, he's casting his shield onto Haddix. He's using his second ability on the Haddix. And 7-0-2 has an Aegis, didn't need to use it. That's one of the benefits, I think, of this character. You don't have CC immunity, but you have the active item beads, right? That a lot of every support is picking it up. If you're a support player right now and you're not grabbing Amanita Charm and beads, of course, Amanita did take a nerf, so maybe we'll convene later. But the beads active item was so impactful because think about your top picks. Fenrir in the majority of games. Susano, still incredibly lethal. Neith, all of this CC, and no one's grabbing beads. The cooldown was just too long at the time, so we're seeing a lot of Aegis, some Phantom Shell, some Blink, but you got to have that beads elsewhere. So that was the one thing that I think was holding these players back from grabbing that Hecate, and now that's been nullified. So that was one of the main things that I wanted to focus in on was the Hecate, and if you have someone like Shinto, like Paul, that can really just commit on this character, that's why you were seeing those teams go. But another thing that was incredibly important, in my opinion, was the comms. That's something that was such a big talking point for us in early or in later days of SPL. How calm are they staying in comms? Are they being loud? Are they saying, hey, Relic is down, Ultim is down, things like that? And just decision making in general. A lot of times we would see some of these teams, like I said, some of these younger teams that don't really have that competitive experience under their belts yet. They're up 4-0, they're up 4-1, they're up 6-2, but they're down 2 Gold Furies and it's 10,000 gold, something like that, because these experienced teams know it's not the kills that matter that much, it's what you do after the kills, or more specifically, the farm that you're chasing. And Teambo with 5Ms is the squad that I wanted to zone in on because I think they have farming down to a science, and especially fights around objectives. You get a pick near a Gold Fury. Do you want to chase and you want to go to the back camps, or do you just want to dial it back and just go for the confirmed objective? I saw that time and time again. And also Borscht was another squad that I saw be able to do the same thing. And it's interesting because I believe the one clip I pulled from Awesome Jake doesn't remind me of old Awesome Jake. Like I watched it and I was like, old Jake is chasing that kill. Like old Jake is jumping into
old
back
Jake
camps.
Feeds there.
He might be under the tier 2 tower, but new Jake calls for the Gold Fury and they go back and they make a smart calculated play. And I was like, that is what I'm talking about, baby. This is the exact one. So Jake goes in, immunes the freeze, grabs the ult, right? Immediately pulls back, and this is the exact moment where they're about to go in. You see Thanatos is like, should we go in? And Jake says, no, go for the Gold Fury. We immediately come back. There was a chance that Rat Milk just dives in and goes for that kill, but they just say, no, we need the objective. Look at the gold lead. It is not that massive. They grab the gold, and they immediately run away. That is such a calculated play that doesn't seem like much. But in a ranked game, I'm chasing to back camps there, right? I want those kills. We have a Thanatos that's 5-0 in the air as we speak. And those are the little micro differences that make a good team to like a great team. Again, that doesn't remind me of old Awesome Jake that we knew from Smite 1. I think old Jake is diving for those kills. He's saying, Ratmail, go in, we can chase. And they said, guys, let's play it safe. Getting 3 Gold Furies as quickly as possible is incredibly important because of how impactful Ancient Fury has been. These Phoenixes hit hard. As far as I'm concerned, sieging can be very difficult until you get things like Runic Bomb under your belt. So you need a way to shut that down, and Ancient Fury is the perfect way to do so. But now, again, I wanted to talk not just about the objective play, but something that I found that you really can't see on broadcast because it's not interesting, right? It's not something that you're going to zone in on really at all. And it was how Scream was farming the map. Now, if you pay attention to itemization, if you're not just going auto build every game, you might have seen a couple junglers pick up Hasar's Wings. It's an item that gives you a little bit of a speed boost every 30 seconds. Another thing, Mordred Ultimate doesn't have a cooldown. You just charge it up. So watch what Scream does here. The fight's over. He's leaving. No one pays attention to this, but he just uses his ultimate, gets to farm immediately. If you listen to the comms, he says, I'm going for chest camp. His team is pushing forward. Scream uses that ult, immediately goes back to base. After this clip, he pops his wings just to move around the map as quickly as possible. But that wasn't an aggressive play. No one's using their ultimate for farm. But Scream just takes it through the wall. And that's just something I found watching his VODs. He's like, hey, we're not going to fight for a bit. I can charge up my energy like it's nothing. I'm ulting to camps. And then we can group back up. I need extra gold. And I'm going to continue to do so. And then
mobility.
Immediately afterwards, he comes to his team. He's like, finished Oath Spear. I've got pen. Let's continue to fight, right? And that's another thing that you're not going to be seeing is people using just small little indications for farm. Something that comes to my mind is when Scream used to get like tier 2 Odibo just for that extra clear time.
Yeah.
Right? Some people made fun of it. Some people said it was bad. Say what you want, he farmed quickly. That was what his goal was, and this is the same idea. When you're winning 8-0 and you're still down 10,000 gold to a team but with 5 Ms, these are the little micro interactions that are making it hard for you to do so. Besides the fact, of course, that they're just pulling Gold Fury. But when you're looking at NA as a whole, when you're looking at every squad that is going to be at the top echelon, I think I saw in EU in particular, I was like, there's 6 teams here that could easily take this bracket, right? They have the skill, they have the technology, they have the ability to learn the meta as quickly as possible. It's just who's going to adapt quickly. I saw the same thing with NA, but these were the little micro differences that are going to push you over the edge. Are you getting that quick farm? Are you paying attention to the fact that Mordred just ulted, after that fight to just go get some camps? Because that ult is very loud. Like, you could definitely hear it, but that's the other thing. It alerts the enemy team, like, bro, I think I'm getting ulted. Like, no, you're not. It's just farm that's being done. And I found that very interesting as well because, again, my idea was to just go back and sort of scan VODs. I was like, well, what are we not picking up on broadcast that could just be like those little micro differences that NA in particular is making that, was a little bit different. But another thing, of course, that I noticed just from NA and EU in particular was this rise of Odin. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, EU, I think, was still mostly on the Fenrir train as far as, like, what is that top pick god if they can get their hands on it. But Odin was looking real clean as well. And my last clip that I wanted to bring up here was just the Gold Fury that team also went for. This is the same style for me, where they Scream, in my opinion, kind of trolls, right? He gets picked up, goes right in, but they're still able to make so much from it. Even with the Kate ult, I really have liked what Cherry in particular, I didn't expect to see Cherry in solo lane so much and like it as much as I did, right? He's liked these warriors so often. And because of that, I was like, how is Cherio going to perform over in solo? Well, turns out he feels right at home. Even though Scream gets picked, you can see he ends up dying because he was standing too far forward. But
as you do.
Mike and Cherio, which is a combination that we've known for a long time with Cherio in the coaching role, I didn't think they were going to be able to mesh together so well as frontliners. You know what I'm saying? Because I think of Cherry as playing like tanky junglers, of course, but it's such a different mindset, and it just seems like they didn't miss a beat. You know what I mean? It seems like they went in like it was nothing and played a heck of a performance. So shouts out to Team Bo with 5Ms. They were my team to watch as far as just learning about those little micro interactions about how to farm the map quicker. Of course, you can't talk about this whole tournament without talking about Scrumptious. Like they looked very clean as well and have just a funny team name that I enjoyed saying. And I think Scrumptious took the best of both worlds, where they were able to farm very well, but also fight very well. Like they were having those high kill count games. They were able to get good leads, but they were also able to translate that into the big kill plays like the Shinta one I showed earlier. But man, I think if we're looking at what to improve on for this week, if you're a team that was just out of that top 16 and you're like, what can I learn? What can I do to jump up my game? Because I want to go to Vegas, right? That's step one. You got to look at how these teams are farming. And I think that's the number one thing that I noticed, because there was so many teams that can pull kills. Like in that last clip we just saw, Sun Prod started out like 2-0, maybe 3-0, something like that, but the team was still so far behind in gold. And there's little adjustments that can be made. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen just you can't just spawn into SMITE 2 with that knowledge. That's something that you have to feel out around the map. But I just wanted to highlight the little things that you could do right now today to farm just a little bit better, to maybe get that first Gold Fury and try and snowball that victory in your favor. Because when you're in a situation where it's best of ones up until finals, anyone can beat anyone, man. There is nothing guaranteed in a format like this. But that was my rendition. That's how I took it. I don't know if you guys saw the same. You watched a little bit of NA, but the farm just seemed to be so incredibly important in comparison to just, hey, we got first blood. Like we watched, I think Scream died at like red buff at level 1 a couple times. A couple times. Yeah. And there's times where that ruins your game as a jungler. Back in the day, you get first blooded, you don't get your speed, you're like, go next. Like I'm done with this. But it almost doesn't matter if you just know the map better than your opponent.
And that was the thing that was interesting, I think, all around. There were several games, and I'll put EMEA included, but there were a lot of games where we would watch a team, and like you'd go down 6-0, and they'd be up 4,000 gold anyway. So it's kind of like, hey, you've been doing a great job. Thumbs up. We're still better than you, and being able to kind of rock that. So again, and this is what's fun, is that there's still one more week, like this week, and if you're watching this now and your team, you're itching to sign up, then sign up now. It's way better for you to sign up while you can. Again, rallycry.gg, and that actually moves us into the next thing, because while NA and EMEA have been going on, we have other regions that are joining the fray. Now, when we crack into them, I'll go LATAM first, just because that's the one I clicked on my phone. It is going to actually end up be joining as a region, NA and EMEA, a little bit later down the line in their opportunity to come, I believe, straight to a LAN here. They'll come to the knockout stage, which is where they will then get a chance to qualify for Vegas to be able to go. They're going to be doing open bracket, which is going to be similar format to the others. 8,000 diamonds per team for first place, and I believe that, again, every single week, right? So if you're coming out all 5 weeks, if you get first all 5 weeks, that's 40,000 that you're getting across your team. And again, the top 2 teams at the end of that are going to be invited to the knockout stage here, where they're going to compete for a chance against, I believe, 3 NA teams, 3 EMEA teams, 2 then, again, coming from LATAM. Those 8 teams will compete for just 6 spots that will then go to Vegas about 3 weeks after that event happens. And this, as well as the next one that I talk about, is going to be starting next Saturday. So today is September 20th. So tomorrow's the 21st. Yep. Everybody be blasting Earth, Wind, and Fire. The week after, the 28th, that's the day that the competition kicks off. That being said, signups are available now. Again, you can go to rallycry.gg/SMITE2, click on the competitions tab on the left, and it'll show you everything you need to see. And admittedly, probably a lot that you don't need to see, because if you're clicking on other regions that you're not in, I'm guessing you're just curious, but they're there and you can see them nonetheless. So if you're LATAM, make sure that you go there, as well as if you are in Brazil or APAC. Now, the difference for Brazil and APAC is that due to visas and stuff, you can go watch the long Q&A where Hindu and Coop get into it, because they know way more about it than I do. And you think I would have retained some of that information, but just because of a lot of things, you're not able to come to the land. So you know what? We're making sure that there's still money on the line. So similar format. First 5 weeks, open bracket, 8,000 diamonds per team if you get first, 250 diamonds no matter what, as long as you just finish a game. And that's going to be the big thing. You play across those 5 weeks. Eventually, the top teams get invited to playoffs, where there is cash prizing on the line. And so you can come out, you can play. And this is another good point, because I think, J-Mac, we've talked about this a couple of times, but if you happen to be from those regions and maybe you don't want to compete, but you want to watch or broadcast the games, things like that, like, please do. Like, we're only going to have brackets otherwise. Like, we need clips so we can see what's going on. So please, if you're in these regions and you're able to, you can stream, you can clip them if you want to. I mean, I've said this and I will stand by it, but it is such a great way to practice casting, is to cast off games like this. And of course, again, if maybe that's not your bread and butter, you do want to compete, you want to go to rallycry.gg and sign up for /SMITE2. That's very important. /SMITE2, because that's going to get you in the right place to begin with. Then go to the competitions tab, click Brazil or APAC, and you'll be able to find the competition for your region. Again, get involved on those cash prizes. September 28th, again, is when those open brackets are kicking off. That's the same time that we're going to be moving towards Swiss, which is why there's just so much Smite going on in one little window of time that it is going to be very interesting, and it's going to make this show more necessary, right? Because like this week, you probably were able to watch both broadcasts. Maybe you missed it and you didn't realize it was going on, so this was a good little recap, and you can be there for tomorrow. But like, realistically, we're going to be having Swiss games going on, which I believe are 8 matches across the weekend. I think we're doing it 4 and 4, so we theory are going to see a lot of them, but there's going to be a lot that are not going. And then, of course, there's an open bracket going in NA and EMEA. And then also we're going to have open bracket in LATAM and Brazil and APAC. There's going to be a lot of Smite competitive going around.
I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but just because of how fantastic this format looks, I want to disagree with you guys. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Every Sports Center clip.
He's the blue light. You're the red light. You're the demon on my shoulder.
I just want to hear J-Mac say a team that he thinks is going to win, and I just want to go into town about how he's so wrong.
They're terrible.
I think Scorps are about to take it all.
What an absolute idiotic call, J-Mac. Are we watching the same game? You think the Scorps? Just kidding. The Scorps look great, but that's the vibe that I want to go for. Maybe as it continues, maybe feelings get more heated. But it's also just fun, we are so excited because there's so much Smite. You can't possibly watch it all. We can't possibly watch it all. But that's what this is for.
That's literally what this is for.
We will, after we cast it,
in 3 weeks,
go back.
This is the way I'm going to learn about Brazil.
Exactly. We are going to give you all the information you need to know. What are some up-and-coming teams? What are some teams that have always been good? And maybe some dark horses to look out for.
And I think to kind of piggyback off a little bit what Igor was saying earlier, if you're going to be streaming the regions, we're going to be covering primarily the EMEA and the NA region. But if you're going to be restreaming or streaming anything from LATAM, from Brazil, I know that I believe it's Esports Anchor is going to be covering the APAC region during their own time, which technically for them actually starts much later at night for us. So it's like we're going to be going to bed and they're going to be starting their games. So if you're a late night watcher, you can probably go there. But if you are streaming your regions, whether it be you just personally or if you have a whole production team that's going to be doing it and spectating everything, tag SMITEPro on Twitter, tag that.
Yeah, there's a spot in the Discord for it, right?
You can even we have a spot in discord.gg/Smite esports. If you go there, there's the stream promotion section. Put your stream down there, ping one of us, and we'll make sure that there's some kind of social promotion that goes out for you guys. That way we can get people over there watching those games on your perspective, and also gives us a place to kind of notify and be like, okay, yeah, I did miss a little bit of LATAM. I'm going to go watch these 2 streams over here real quick because they're going to be, casting it. They're going to be streaming their POVs. So whether you're doing just a gameplay POV and you're taking part and you want to show it off what's going on, or if you're doing a full production, casting, anything like that, put it out there, tag us, let us know what's going on. We would love to try and get the extra promotion there and get some love your way. Like I said, I believe it's confirmation that Esports Anchor is going to be doing APAC, so we at least know one big shot that's going to be going that way, and we'll be making sure to get some extra love out to them. But there's a lot of Smite to cover, and there's way more than just our studio and that we're capable of doing so. So we highly encourage anybody out there where if you are in one of these 3 regions outside of the EMEA and NA, broadcast it. Whether you're streaming your POV, you're taking part in the tournament, or if you're casting it, just go out there, have a little bit of fun with it.
Now, this says predictions, and this is where it gets interesting because I'm in the future. Because of Swiss, and again, when I said it's 8 matchups because it's 16 teams, friendly reminder, and this is just as much for me as it is for everyone watching, that's per region with NA and EMEA, which means that I think, if I remember correctly, we're choosing 4 from each region every week that we're going to be tuning in on, with kind of a backup essentially to go into the other one in the event either our set ends too early or whatever's going on. But because of that, again, there's going to be a lot of Smite that isn't watched. But when we get to that point, it's going to be a lot easier to say, hey, we're looking at these matchups. Trelly, give me a prediction. J-Mag, give me a prediction. We're still an open bracket though, which leaves things really open-ended. And so I'm kind of curious, and I do like that. And maybe, Billy just came into my ears and told me we could maybe talk about meta changes, which actually might change predictions. So I'd like to talk about those first. And then I just want to hear from y'all about teams that you're going to keep your eyes on and look at this. So Ama is, as people maybe who have been playing or watched earlier have seen, in the game right now and available for play. Thanatos and Nuwa are going to be competitively banned this weekend, though, and that's just, there's some issues with them making sure that they work. We want to make sure that it's all as competitive as possible, so they will not be available. But worth mentioning, and we had talked about it with Sundering Arc, but Bacchus as well nerfed, and then of course the addition of a Pyromancer and a Runic Bomb getting added to the map is pretty big in terms. I mean, Charlie, we're talking NA, and you're talking the investment they had specifically in Gold Fury, but realistically, I think objectives all around. Mm-hmm. Hey, here's another objective.
Yeah, pretty much immediately. What I spent a solid 10 minutes of trying to zone in on how NA likes to play was talking about objective pressure, and then you add Amaterasu and Runic Bomb and Pyromancer into the conversation. So yeah, this is going to be exactly up NA's alley for how they like to play. They're going to be trying to get Ama as much as possible, I imagine, and immediately pulling your Furies and your Pyromancers, like immediately, like the second it's available with that Ama passive. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Ama support. I've already watched a lot of PBM stream, just because I know that he's going to immediately jump into ranked and play these characters, and he was playing Ama support. I'm not trying to leak any strats. This is public knowledge. He's been playing on his own live stream, and he's been just starting that aura, the first ability, not getting any damage, just saying, hey, I'm going to give aura to my team. We're going to clear the wave as quickly as possible. I'm either going to give you a shield or I'm going to give you some strength and int, and we're just going to go over 3 steps to the right, attack the Gold Fury 3 times, and it's going to get shredded. Like that, I can see that playstyle coming through pretty much immediately. Does it mean that solo Amaterasu is not extremely powerful as well? There's been some back and forth between intelligence-based builds and strength-based builds, or just full tank. In my opinion, Triton's Conch Death Toll is going to be the start regardless. Like, that is going to be the start on just about everyone. But from there, you can kind of do what you want. I've loved things like Gem of Focus, Berserker Shield. There's a lot of ways to build Amaterasu, but doesn't change the fact that I think she's going to be very strong. And something to keep in mind is you can blink during her ult. So even if you think you're about to miss that third hit and not get the stun, you can blink to confirm it, and she does a ton of damage. So yeah, that automatically is going to be at the top of my list. I don't think Odin's going anywhere. I don't think Fenrir is going anywhere. And I don't think Akate is going anywhere. Those are my top 4. I think Bacchus is going to fall off a bit. Susano, still very potent, but you got to position correctly. You have to watch your CC immunity, things like that. But those are my top 4 to look out for sure.
And J-Mac, I was kind of curious because Bacchus, I think for a long time, well, first off, everybody was a Bacchus truther. It's not limited to anybody. I think everybody and then some. Because he's good, or he was good.
Yeah.
And so I guess the question is, and I'm looking at it's specifically because he was next to Sundering Arc, but I know we've discussed hey, there were 2 to 3 Sundering Arcs. Now it's maybe 1, maybe 2, if you're really feeling it. So where do you expect those to end up going?
I think that Bacchus is going to kind of lose that top priority that we were seeing before. Bacchus was doing as much and sometimes maybe more damage than carries by building full tank, because his chug, you use it, your next basic gets a really nice buff of damage that goes with it. That scales off your protections, and your belly flop does damage that scales off strength and your protection. So the goal was just, I'm going to be as tanky and as obnoxious as possible and do a bazillion damage because I can just flop in. And you could before preload the chug. You chug, sit there, kind of wait, initiate, belly flop, get the auto, chug, another auto, and you've probably nearly killed one of the carries. Bacchus's nerfs that have come in this patch are going to heavily reduce that. Not just the scaling that he gets from the chug to make those do less damage, but now there is a hard timer on chug. You can't just pop one up and be like, all right, cool, I got my chug, I'm going to hold on to this auto forever. It is locked to the timer of chug now, so there is going to be a bit of a reduction there. So I don't imagine Bacchus is at the top of priority anymore. I think that he's still good.
Is he still getting picked?
A very tanky god. I think that he maybe drops a tad bit in priority with Amaterasu joining the fray. I think that Ymir has also just been pretty solid, as well as Ares. So I think that Bacchus drops in priority, but doesn't drop off entirely just yet. I think that level of CC and initiation is something that a lot of other supports don't have just yet. Not many other gods can just jump into the middle of a team fight and get a quick little displacement knock-up on people, and then immediately follow up with more. This is the god of triple CC to his name. He's got the flop, knock-up, the belch, stun, and then intoxicate to make the disjointment and being able to move around there. So I think he still has some level of priority, but not nearly as potent. And I think to kind of couple with that, with the nerf that came to Sundering Arc, is it's not as strong in the first 9 levels of the game now. It was like 400 plus guaranteed damage at level 1. Now you're looking at like 200 damage at level 1. So it's more contestable. If somebody's trying to go for an invade, you're not almost always going to get that guaranteed, but it's still going to be powerful. And the most important thing is once you hit that level 10 spike, that's when you get to the 1k damage. And anytime that you can walk up and say, this is a free 1,000 damage no matter what, it's going to be a good item. When you couple that now with Runic Bomb, you have the potential of putting 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 damage out in the blink of an eye with a combination of these. So I imagine that we'll still see Sundering Arc, maybe just not quite to the extent before. I think that the invade meta won't be as potent as it was in the past, where we're seeing 3 of them being picked up per game, or even 2.
You're gonna have to work for it more.
You're probably only gonna see the one thrown out in that regard. So I think that we're gonna see less of each of them, but they're not completely gone.
So now I'm gonna ask, and well, I guess EMEA is first this weekend, so it makes sense to do that first. And good on me for remembering who does which. Because this seems way easier and smarter in my brain. Hopefully it translates to that. A team or two that you're like thinking we should pay attention to these guys this weekend.
Yeah.
And if you want to, you can call them like, hey, this is gonna who takes it all, but that's up to you.
I mentioned earlier that Team Risk is probably the team to beat right now. Obviously, winning out in week number 1 puts a big target on your back. Everybody's gonna be looking that way. So aside from just the number 1 seed, I do think that looking at any of those teams that were in the top 4, as well as looking over at Mockingbird and Scorps, I think that those are 2 teams that didn't quite make it to the top 4, or maybe even the top 8. But have that potential to make it a little bit further down the road, to at least make it into that Swiss stage of play. But I think that Giovanni Giorgio is another team to be looking at. Smokebreak as well. We'll have to figure out what their addition to their roster is going to be to try and see how that team adapts. So I think that that's really going to be an extra focus, is what changes happen with that team a little bit more so. But I think Giovanni is a powerful team that just fell a little bit short, and is probably my money for making that run back to that top 2, and that's probably the worst, the top 4.
Giovanni was the team. I was going to choose one. I was like, I got high hopes for those guys. Something about that adapting guy, just seems a little special.
It's hard to root against the king.
Realistically, it's also Coast pulls me in, because so if you haven't watched any for some reason, if you're watching this and you haven't watched any Smite Esports, well, thank you for being here. But I'm also curious as to what brought you here. But if you're looking for something that is just really, really fun to watch, go watch literally any competitive game, especially big stage. So I would go, if you go to the very last Smite World Championship and watch any of the Dragons matchups, just watch Coast. The energy that Coast has when playing, especially competitive, it's just so crazy, and it's so fun to watch. And it's something that I think the reason I want to watch this team is because it is so fun watching Coast get happy. So I'm really curious. And Trelly, I'm going to turn the same question to you, but I'm going to do something that I didn't do with JMac, which is just I'm going to put my team up front first.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Because I was surprised that the Globe team were able to knock him out, but Borscht was really high on my list as a team I expected to do well and continue to expect to do well.
Are you dumb?
Yeah, I'm done.
No, I said, are you dumb? I wanted to disagree.
We
were doing.
I thought you said, are you done?
No,
yeah.
I was trying to disagree. I do agree with you, though.
No, you can.
I wanted to create some controversy, but you're spitting.
We gotta get blue lights behind you, bro. We gotta solve this.
You are correct. I think Borscht is a team that can certainly still compete with the best of them. I, of course, am going to keep my eye on Scrumptious, just because I really like what they were able to do. I thought that...
Plus, that's a great name.
Great name. I thought that Leon in support still makes a lot of sense to me. Was very impressed with Nog in the jungle. I'm so used to seeing him in mid, and he still can cook in the jungle. Cowabunga, always going to be a threat, no doubt about it. I'm still been watching a lot of. I watched a lot of just Paul and Aurora's back and forth, like just listening, because I was wondering, like, have they lost any of that? Are they still have the comms as locked down as you could imagine? And the answer is yes. And specifically, Sot's God Pool was interesting to me. Like a lot of Hades solo from Sot, and the builds, like it's like Book of Thoth, Breastplate, Stone of Binding, like that kind of vibe I really enjoy. And I thought it was going to be a decent counter to the Odin, but it honestly seems like Odin's getting the better of that matchup. So something to keep your eye on. And Food Drive for Globe, man. I think that's a team that it didn't shock us that they made it as far as they did, but I want to see if they can replicate that same placement. I want to see if they can make it up to the semifinals the same sort of way.
Yeah.
And if they do it twice, I mean, you can't call it a fluke then, right? And I don't think anyone's calling it a fluke, but I think
I am now.
Okay, well there you go. Now
I've got the red light behind me.
We got some controversy. I think that they are a very solid team, and if they can take what they learned specifically from this week and then bring that into week number 2, because a lot of these matchups, again, being best of ones, could have been like balanced on a knife's edge, and it was just a team fight that was the big difference maker. So if you could just clean up a bit of those mistakes, man, some great things could come from it. So those are my teams. I do echo what you're saying about Borscht, though. That's a squad that if they can lock down their objective play as we showed in my one club that they were able to do, and then translate that into late game. And I'm also curious because we did talk about their roster, where it was supposed to be Baskin in solo and Fino K playing support, and they brought in Awesome Jake, and Fino went to solo. That switch-up could be interesting as well. So I'm going to keep my eye on them leading up to this weekend and, see if they can have a similar style of performance, as well as, again, Scrumptious, Cowabunga, and Food Drive for Globe.
Well, I think we did the thing.
We sure did.
Guys, and you know what?
We didn't fight at all.
Not nearly enough. Next week,
we gotta be nice week.
Tune in next week where boxing gloves are finally on. One of us is punching the other, and I won't tell you who. I do think, though, it is worth mentioning up front. Again, discord.gg/Smite Esports. Whether you want to compete or just keep up with stuff, it's just a really good place to be. You can yap about the games with other people who are interested in Smite competitive there as well. So it's just a good spot to be, as well as making sure that you're in the best place possible for all news, whether it's going to be these open bracket tournaments that are going on or what happens in the future, right? What happens in the eventually post-Vegas world that we're going to find ourselves in mid-January, things like that. But make sure if you want to compete, you're going to rallycry.gg/SMITE2. Free diamonds just for showing up and playing a game. You could get absolutely bodied and it does not matter. You're still getting free diamonds. And so make sure that you're doing that. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern is when we are going to be going live with EMEA, the Open Bracket Week 2. Again, the top 16 teams are going to be moving forward. And I believe, I don't know if we've said this out anywhere yet, but I can see, and it's not going to show up on any camera, but there's a little like rolly thing over there. We're doing a bit afterward, but the bit realistically is that the Swiss seeding is also random at the very first week, so we need to figure out what teams are going up against what. So at the end of tomorrow, and again at the end of Sunday, here in the studio, we're going to be figuring out what those matchups are so that we know what the first round of Swiss is going to look at. So make sure that you're tuning in throughout the entire day. But until then, from Trelly, from J-Mac, from me, and everyone back in production, thank you so much for watching Smite Too Long Didn't Watch, which we condensed a week into like 45 minutes or something, so that's pretty good, I'd say. And we'll see you next week in Smite Too Long Didn't Watch, but also hopefully this weekend in the long form, which is just the competition. Yay! Made in Georgia.